Hi, this is Mike Ignatoski, the creator of the GreenFox spreadsheet, the spreadsheet that uses Excel programming to make it behave like a computerized baseball scorebook or score sheet. It also automatically computes the game stats, which can be a big time saver. And even better, GreenFox can be configured to operate in one of three different league modes where it can track the cumulative stats for all players and teams in the league. Hello and welcome back. This is video number 4 in a series of 4 videos, so I believe this will be the last one in this series, showing GreenFox version 3, creating a custom league, playing a game, and saving the stats. If you haven't watched the first 3 videos, I'd recommend that, but I'm just going to very briefly go over how we got here, which was in the first 2 videos, it was creating the league. And I'll just show the league standings here with the standings tab at the bottom. We created a league with these 8 teams. They're all historical teams. Their rosters are based on these players, although they're not complete rosters. They're pared down. But anyway, these are the 8 teams that we made in this league that has 2 sub-leagues. And the name of our league is the 70s Super 8 League. After we did that, we used this load historical team roster button to do a lot of the heavy lifting to load the rosters for all our teams, which gave us all this data. We then created default starting lineups for the teams. Actually, I'm going to show this options first. For our league, we chose in these options, and especially game option number 10. And in this league, we're playing lefty-righty splits as part of our gameplay, so that matters. So because of this setting is on, it says it's going to use lefty-righty splits. So we need to have for each team a default lineup versus a left-handed starter and a default lineup versus a right-handed starter. So on this LG lineup, we made a lineup here. You can see the Yankees have their left-right, the A's have their left-right lineup. And the last thing we did as far as the configuration was on the schedule sheet or schedule tab, we created one game. It's just a start, but in this game we said it's going to be a game between the Yankees and the A's at Oakland. It's going to be Ed Figueroa against Catfish Hunter. And this name is Catfish Oak Hunter because there's also Catfish Hunter also played for the 76 Yankees, so he's on both teams, but this way we can distinguish who's who. So from there, that was the first 2 videos. Then in game 3, we actually played this game and used the score sheet tab of GreenFox to keep score. So this is the score sheet. This was for the visiting Yankees. You can see here's the pitchers. We can scroll down here. This was the A's, and you can see the A's scored 6 unearned runs and won 6-5. So now we're going to go over the last step, which is saving the game stats and saving the cumulative stats. So let's see how that works. So back to the score sheet, we've completed the game. Step 1 is save the game stats. So that's this do stats button up here. So I'm going to click this do stats button. It will complete the stats, and it's giving us a stats validation alert. It says FYI, the visiting team runs 5 and RBIs 4 don't match. They might be correct, but it might indicate missing runs and or RBIs. Please proceed as appropriate. This is just a warning or an alert. It doesn't mean anything's for sure wrong. And this just says GreenFox completed the stats, but it just says there are no limitations with inherited runners making outs, which basically means that you need to make sure that the pitching stats are correct, because sometimes with inherited runners on base they can be a little complicated. Anyway, so the runs and RBIs, it's really just an alert to say make sure they're right. You can see here, it shows you also the runs and RBIs along the team scores, team stat lines here. So the A's had 6 runs and 6 RBIs. The Yankees had 5 and 4. And if we look at this again, the reason is 1 run scored on this 2-base error on the center fielder on this ball hit by White. So that's where the missing RBI is. So everything is good. Now, before I go on to the next step, we got to go finish. I'm going to show something that can occur when you're keeping score in the score sheet. There is some intelligence there, but not a lot. So I'm going to go and make a mistake intentionally on this and just kind of show you what would happen. So one thing that's not totally uncommon, but you can sometimes pick it up if you're missing a number in your scoreboard, is if you forget to put the end of inning thing on. So I'm just going to go back here and take this end of inning marker off. Click here and say toggle end of inning marker. Okay, so let's just pretend I play my game like this. And then I click do stats. And you don't have to erase these to redo them. Every time you click this button, it clears them out. So here's an error. It says, hey, 0 end of inning markers were found in inning 3 of the V visitor score sheet. And then it bailed on computing these game stats because of this error. Basically, please correct it. And so it exactly explained what the problem was. Game 3 of the visitor, there is no end of inning. So the fact that it didn't find one, that was the problem. So I'm going to go back here and turn this back on. And then that should do that. Another thing that can happen is, let's say you accidentally start on the wrong batter. Like, let's say at the top of the 4th for the Yankees, instead of Piniella leading off, which is what really happened and is correct, let's say that Thurman Munson here, let's just say he walked, even though I'm not going to deal with the real ramifications of that. But let's just say this person did something, okay? But the point is, it's not blank. So then if we were to click the do stats now, it'll give you this error. It says invalid score sheet data, team V, visitors, lineup position 3, around inning 4 or 5. Something's messed up. So that was visitor. So this is the Yankees. Lineup position 3. So in the third person in the order, it said around inning 4 or 5. Something's messed up in here. It doesn't always know. This should have been there. It doesn't always know what's wrong or what the right answer is, but it can tell it isn't right. So that's just picking up this here, and I'm just going to hit this clear to fix it. But in this case, if that really did mess you up, or you did really mess up your lineup, then you would likely have to, depending on how you want to deal with that kind of stuff, you may have to go back and replay part of the game, or however you want to do it. But some of the things, like some errors it'll pick up as you score, especially as you complete the inning. But there are other things, that more details, that it doesn't attempt to validate until you do the stats. So that's just how that works. Anyway, back to the stats. Let's see what we got to do after we hit this do stats button, which did a lot of the work, but let's look at it closer. Okay, now that we have the score sheet back the way it's supposed to be and correct, I'll click the do stats button again to complete these game stats. And now we just get our warning about the runs and RBIs not matching, which is okay. And then our basic message saying it's computed the stats successfully. Make sure they're right is up to you. Okay, so let's first take a little glance at this to see, if it looks right, if Rivers looks correct. He was 1 for 4 with a walk and a strikeout. I like to look at these ones that are a little more complicated. Oscar Gamble was 1 for 2 with a run, a double, and a hit by pitch. This purple line means that's where the pinch hitter came in, which is Carlos May. He was 1 for 1. And this green line here indicates a pinch runner. That was Sandy Alomar, who stole second base. There was a throwing error. He got to third, but was erased on this double play. Squeeze attempt by Willie Randolph. So overall, I think these look good. Down here we see the pitcher stats, which when you click the do stats button, it does make all these rows visible again, so you can see the pitcher stats. So you can see here, those are done, and I want to kind of focus in on this cell here with the red triangle in the corner. So all cells with red triangle have some note in there that's usually useful information, and this one under this column with all these different types of stats, this one is called the miscellaneous pitcher game stats, and it just says click in this column for a game pitcher stat. Click in this column to allow you basically to enter, edit miscellaneous pitching stats, such as win, loss, complete game, shutout, etc. So if we look at our game here, we can kind of look at up this and say, all right, the A's were winning the whole game. Captain gave up 5 runs in the top of the 6th, but he pitched 5 innings and they won, so he would get the win. Paul Lindblad, I think in theory, would get a hold, and with this 1-run lead at the end, Raleigh Fingers would get a save for pitching the 9th. And then down here for the Figueroa, he would get the loss, and Tidrow would really not get anything. You could give him a game finished if you wanted to. So figuring out who won and lost the game is not something that GreenFox does. Although maybe in some simple cases it could. Right now it doesn't do it ever. So that's what you, the official scorer, need to provide, and that's what this is for. So it does indicate this GS, which means game started. But so let's click it here for Ed Figueroa. And it brings up this little window, pitching stats. Click all that apply. It already knows that he started the game, and really all we need to add is that he lost the game. It wasn't a quality start, which it was like 3 runs or less in 6 innings. So let's say, okay. So we add a loss. For Dick Tidrow, we could leave it as nothing. If you want to say that he finished the game, you could do that if you want. It's up to you. So down here, Catfish Hunter got the win. He didn't get a quality start. Actually, I'm not going to give him the win, though, because I want to show you what happens if you forget. Paul Lindblad, we said, gets a hold if you keep those stats. And Raleigh Fingers gets a save. And whenever you click the save, it automatically clicks this game finished. And if you want to change anything, you can go back and click something else. It's fine. So that's that. So I intentionally didn't give Catfish Hunter the win because I want to show you how it catches this mistake later in this process. But the next thing I want to say is GreenFox does not compute any real fielding stats for players. But what it does do is it does some work as far as tracking errors. So you can see these 3 boxes here, 2 little tables plus this button. You can see these are what's called the fielding miscues table. So for the Yankees, it shows some errors. Let's hover on this window. So the errors are listed in this format, position, and then inning. So like a C3 means a catcher made an error in the 3rd inning, and this LF5 is left fielder made an error in the 5th inning. And the Yankees didn't have any pass balls, but the A's did. So if you look down here, it says each pass ball is listed by the inning in which it occurred. So if you see 155, that would mean there were three pass balls altogether, one in the first inning and two in the fifth. Okay, so what's going on here? So this says, yeah, the Yankee shortstop made an error in the first and the fifth inning. So one thing that GreenFox doesn't do, like I said, is track who's playing what position in what inning. That's a lot of work, and it's something that I can pretty much guarantee GreenFox will never do. But you can do it if you want to. But it does enforce when you're playing in a league mode that each position is accounted for in each team's starting lineup. So what this button here does, which I'll click, is let's just do it. It says detected game errors will be copied to the game stats, but they're only assigned to players in the starting lineup because GreenFox doesn't track substitutions or changing positions or whatever. So you can manually correct them if you want to or need to. Do you want to proceed? So I'm going to say yes. Then, then I get a message that says detected game errors were copied to the game stats table, which is over here, these table. Manually correct if necessary. If we look at this, Yankee shortstop should have two errors. That was Jim Mason. If you look over here now, Jim Mason has two in the error column. You can see here's the error column. He has two, and nobody else has any. Down for the A's, they had a center fielder. That's Bill North. He had an error in the sixth inning, and Ray Fosse, the catcher, in the eighth. So down here, here's Gene Tennis. Ray Fosse with an error, and Bill North, the center fielder, has an error. So it doesn't, when you click the game stats button, it doesn't fill these in. If you choose to add them, you click this, but you're kind of agreeing to being responsible to make sure they're right. So those are kind of the two manual things that you may or have to do. You have to fill in these pitcher stats, at least the win and the loss in a league game. But tracking the errors, that is optional. So let's go on to the next step here of, now that we have our game stats in line, of how to save them permanently for the cumulative stats. One last thing I want to say about these stats is if you think something was wrong here, you can, ideally you want to fix it in your score sheet and compute the stats and have it corrected, but if you can, it doesn't stop you from putting corrections or any numbers in the stats area. It doesn't validate it. So if you wanted to say, hey, this really wasn't a double, it was a triple, you could go in here and type a 1 if you wanted to. So if you need to make any manual corrections, you can, but hopefully you shouldn't have to. Okay, a couple other things that I want to touch on before we go and jump to the cumulative stats. Excuse me. One is walks and intentional walks you can see here. So intentional walks are a subset of walks, meaning if let's look down here where there was an intentional walk for Ray Fosse in his stat line. It shows that he had 2 walks and 1 intentional walk. So that doesn't mean he had 3 total. It means he had 2 walks total, and one of these walks was intentional. So that's just how to clarify that. And similarly, it works the same in the pitching stats. Here, Ed Figueroa had 3 walks and 1 intentional. That means one of his 3 walks was an intentional walk. And just to review this pitcher stat line, again, it's BF. This is batters faced, outs. This is kind of the classical way to write innings pitched with the decimal and then thirds of an inning. hits, walks, intentional walks, strikeouts, home runs, runs, earned runs, hit by pitch, wild pitches, balks, and this is the pitch count. And if you recalled, if you watched the other video, I only use the pitch count for Rollie Fingers in this top of the ninth inning. We could have done it for everybody, but I think in general it's not a feature that many people incorporate into their games or their games really use. But if you do, you could use it. And I wanted just to show how that would work. So you could see Rollie Fingers has a 26 in his pitch count, but nobody else has any. So I just wanted to show how that showed up. The other thing I want to say is it's not uncommon that you find a mistake or something in here that you need to then recalculate your stats. Maybe it was you forgot to indicate where the other pitcher came in or something like that. So you can easily go in, redo the stats, and I'm going to click the button now. But now I get this message that says, hey, do you want to overwrite the pitcher string stats? And that's just kind of it's like miscellaneous stats. Example, win, loss, complete game, etc. That's these things on here that we put in for, Figueroa with the loss and Rollie Fingers with the save, etc. So if those didn't change, and I don't want to enter them again, I'm going to say, no, don't overwrite those. And by default, it leaves it at no. So it kind of sniffs that out, whether you've had entered this in here, and you don't have to do it again. Similarly, once I say no, it asks me the same question regarding the error stats column. So it sees that there are errors listed in here, and if those didn't change, it says, do you want to overwrite them? And I'm going to say no, because they're right, so don't erase them. Okay, so now I get the same thing with this, but you can see here it kept all my stats here and it kept these errors. So I just wanted to show that once you do the manual part of those pitchers' miscellaneous stats and the errors, if you recalculate your stats, you have the option to preserve what you already entered, or if you think you need to change them, you can allow it to be overwritten or basically cleared when you do the stats again. Okay, now let's move on to the cumulative stats. Okay, and before I click the Save Cumulative Stats button, this green button up here, I want to remind you that we intentionally didn't give Catfish Hunter the win here because I wanted to show you how this validation worked. So let's assume this is all good, and we want to save that. Oh, actually, before I do that, I want to say something else I just thought of. The scoreboard here, just grabs these hits, errors from these totals over here. So when you compute the game stats, then these fill in. But related to that, there's nothing stopping you from clicking this Do Stats button pretty much any time during the game. And so some people, if you want to see what the hit total is for the game, or if you want to see, what somebody's stat line was, even though you can look at it right in the score sheet, you could hit this Do Stats button several times during the game or after every inning if you want to. It doesn't take long to compute them if you want to do that. It doesn't really hurt anything. So that's the last thing, maybe the last thing about the game stats. Now, the cumulative stats. So as mentioned, this green button up here, which is only visible in league mode, is how you save your league game stats. Now, when I was prepping for this video, I had saved a prior version of this game, even though it was incomplete. So when I save this one, it'll prompt me to overwrite it. But on your first game, and typically it wouldn't do that unless you had already saved them. But so let's say I click this. This is what I wanted to show you with the pitching stats. It says home game result was W, meaning the home team, which was here the A's, won the game. But no W was found in the pitching stats. Please correct and retry saving your game stats. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show was if you make a mistake here, and now I'm going to make one more mistake, which is say, I'll give him the, actually I'm going to accidentally give him the loss. And it should still balk at me here and says, hey, I still didn't find this win. Okay. And similarly, if I accidentally gave it to, well, yeah, let's say I accidentally gave it to Lindblad too, for some wrong reason. You say save. It'll give you this message and say, showing you this is, hey, now you have more than one W were found in the pitching stats. Please fix this. So it's not super bulletproof, but it does check a few things, basically for that there's only one win and one loss if your game wasn't a tie, and those are attached to the right teams. So now we should be good to go here. I fixed them up. I'll say save. Now this is what I was saying before. I had saved this in prepping for this video, so this is why it says you want to overwrite them. But so usually that you won't get this message, but sometimes you will have saved the game stats, and maybe as soon as you do or right after you do, you realize that hey, there's something wrong with these stats. I need to fix this. Maybe you forgot to give a pitcher a save or something like that, complete game. Anyway, so you can, while it's still here on the score sheet, you can redo it and it'll detect that it already found some stats and you can rewrite them and just say, yeah, it's not going to create duplicates. So I'll say okay to, when it says okay to overwrite, I'm going to say yes or click yes. Then it goes through some Excel backflips just for a fact here. And then hopefully you'll get this message that says game stats were successfully saved. So let's see what that means. First, I'll just mention these cumulative stats sheets down here on the bottom. There are 8 of them, and they all look kind of similarly with these abbreviation names. But basically, all the ones that start with a G are game stats. All the ones that start with a C are cumulative stats. If the second letter is a P, it's for a game player stats. So the second letter is player, or if it's a T, it means team. So this is game, player, game, team. Same for the cumulative, player or team. The third letter is whether it's for batting or pitching. So this would be game, player, batting. And the last letter means stats for all of them, so it doesn't really tell you much of anything. So really it's just the first 3 letters that determine what it is. So it ends up on this GTPS, which is the game, team, pitching stats. But let's go back to the first one here, which is the game, player, batting stats. So this is effectively, the batter's box score for both teams put together. And you can see here it's got both teams. It shows their ID, it shows their lineup name that they played in this one game, and these are all the stats straight from the score sheet. So with only one game, it's not that exciting, but as your season goes on, this will just get longer and longer, and it does have all these filters and sortable things up here. If you wanted to sort this by something, you could, or you wanted just to zoom in on, just show me Chris Chambliss. And once you played 20 games, you'd get all of Chris Chambliss's stats, kind of his game log right here. And that can be nice to look at, especially for pitchers, or can see if somebody's on a hot streak or whatever. Right, I'm just going to clear this filter. Okay, game player pitching stats. So here are the pitching stats, and you can see here. Here's kind of these miscellaneous, or what I was calling string stats. This start, win, loss, quality start, complete game, shutout, hold, blown save, game finished, saved. And then these are the stats that you'd see in the stat line of the game: the batter faced, outs, innings pitched, blah blah blah. Down here to the pitch count. Here's that 26 for Rolly Fingers. If we go to the next one, this game team batting stats. So these are just what it says: game and team. So it shows these first few columns just talk. I'll say talk, but have information about the game ID, when the sim game was played, which team this is for, whether they were the home or the visitor, the result, their runs scored, etc. So for every game, there's going to be two rows, one for each team, and it shows the opponent starter, and then here are the actual number stats. And hey, I gotta look what's going on with this. But I'll get back to that in a second. So here's the team pitching stats. So it gives you the same info on the game in general. What the heck's going on? Okay, I'm not sure what was going on there, but after I stopped the recording and switched to the sheets again, it showed all the column headers. So this is what it should be. So now this is looking at the game team batting stats, and I wanted to show this because this is the first time where we see the computed stats. So these are all the standard columns from the stat sheet, the score sheet. But starting in 32, these are the computed stats, which it computes singles just for the sake of singles, total bases, plate appearances, batting average, slug, on base, and OPS. So that's the stats that it computes. Similarly for the pitching, if we look at the game team pitching stats, pitch count is the last one that comes off the score sheet, and then these are the computed stats: the WHIP, the ERA, the strikeouts per walk, and strikeouts per 9, homers per 9, and walks per 9. So those are the computed stats or metrics for pitching. So that's what it does for every game, and really, it's really just these first two sheets: the game played batting stats and the game player. Game player pitching stats and game player batting stats. These two are really the most essential because with these two, all the other 6 can be computed just using these 2 sheets. So these are the ones you can't afford to get messed up, is what I'm trying to say. So the game teams are just kind of adding up the game players, and similarly with the pitching. So for the cumulative stats, they start with these C's, these last 4, and if we go to the cumulative stats, right now they're blank. So what we're going to do here is figure out how to compute the cumulative stats from what we've got. Okay, so to compute these cumulative stats, I shouldn't say accidentally, but I clicked this compute stats, but I didn't realize I wasn't on a recording. So I'm going to do it again just so you could get a feel for the time. And when there's only one game, it doesn't take much time at all. So if I click it now, it'll erase them and recompute them. And here you go. And if you wanted to see through one game who had the highest OPS, you could click on this and say sort it from largest to smallest, and Reggie Jackson is leading the league. So let's go to the pitching one. I could compute it from, this shows batting and pitching, but if I go to the pitching, it has its own button. And just for dramatic effect, I'll do it here. So you can see here, these are all the pitching stats. Looks like I need to do some justification fix here, but it's pretty minor. Okay, so here are all the pitching stats with the computed columns, and these cumulative team batting and team pitching right now are still blank. So I could compute in with these buttons. So here I'm going to click this orange one on the batting, which says compute all the cumulative team stats. So I'll do that, and it's done. So here are the cumulative team batting stats. So you can see right now that the Yankees are batting 364. The A's are batting 185, but 185 won the game. Similarly, if we look now at the pitching, this would be the pitching stats for each team. And it tells you how many games they would play, whatever. Like I said, so with one game, it's pretty underwhelming. But the more games you play, obviously the richer the stats get, and that's really what makes it fun. Okay, so that wraps up the stats portion of of this of this video, and I guess that almost wraps up this 4 video series on this a custom league, playing a game, and saving the stats. And I do want to mention that regarding the stats, one thing that, although it does a lot here already, one thing it doesn't do that I'm looking to add in a future release is a separate sheet just for your league leaders. So I haven't figured out how that's going to work exactly yet, but right now you have the ability to see who's leading anything just by going to the cumulative pages and then sorting by whatever column you want to see who's leading that and who's in second, etc. You can see it everybody in any order you want to, but I understand there's sometimes you want to see just who are the top players in all the categories kind of at once. So I do anticipate making some kind of a leaders sheet, but it's not available yet. The other feature that I wanted to mention that I probably should have mentioned it maybe in the prior video has to do with the game stats, but maybe it makes more sense as once you complete the game stats here by both the automatic or automated portion as well as the manual portion of the errors and the pitching stats. One thing that I would recommend you do is to save a copy of your game. And there are different ways you may want to do it, but one way that I think is useful is to print this whole sheet, the score sheet. And that's what this green button here is about. By doing this, and I'll click it here, it basically highlights this whole range of the spreadsheet that's used. And it says here you can now print it to a PDF, and be sure to print the content as the selection, print selection, and not print active sheet. So I'll say okay, it'll leave this all selected. I just want to scroll down here and kind of show you what's selected on the score sheet. So it's pretty much just all that's used for the score sheet itself and the game stats. Now from here, you'd want to go to your print button in Excel, wherever that is. And for this version, I have to click these little buttons up here to get the file, to get the print, and this is where you may need to change your settings. So you'd want to set this, a lot of times it's just my regular printer, but you'd want to choose some kind of print to PDF here, like that. Make sure this setting here is set to print selection. It usually defaults to active sheet. So you want to have this print selection here. I recommend printing it in landscape orientation because I think it comes out better. But I like to use this tabloid page or paper size, which is 11 by 17. And I always click this fit on one sheet, so it kind of stretches it or shrinks it to proportionally so that it fills up as much of your sheet as you can. So anyway, this is how I like to save my games if I wanted to save along, and it could be useful if you realize that maybe you made a mistake or wanted to look back at what happened in this game or your score sheet, that you'd have something to go back to, and maybe you need to modify a stat, or just, this is also a nice way you can use this in its entirety, or you could open this up in some kind of image viewer and just copy out a section if you want to post on some board, some Facebook group, some whatever. You want to send somebody a picture of, like, hey, look at this awesome game of you know, Vita Blues perfect game that happened in my league, or whatever you want to show. This is a nice way to show that score sheet, and you could maybe show some of the stat lines, but it's it's a pretty clean way to share the results of a game that people can understand. So what you do here is, once you get these settings set correctly with the PDF selection, orientation, and page size, and fit to sheet, you just say print, and I'll print it to my desktop. I'm just going to call this, I already did it once, but I'm just going to overwrite it and say this is game one. You call it whatever you want. Yeah, overwrite this. Okay, so it saved it, and then I'll open it up. Here's my game, and this is what it looks like in this. This is actually using the browser to look at it, but you could open in whatever application you want to open your PDFs. But you can see here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can kind of see what it looks like, and it's quite clear. And from this, sometimes, like I said, you could open this up in a different imaging tool, or maybe you could use your if you have a tool for screen capture. Like, I use something called Snagit, and if I wanted to say, okay, I want to share this score sheet, this part of this game of whatever, I could, this would be my screen capture, and I might just grab this part of it or something and say, hey, I wanted to show you this, share this great game that this awesome hold that Paul Lindblad had in this opening game. So I could, with my Snagit, grab this picture and annotate it, do whatever I want. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of not get too much into that detail, but that's, I think, the flexibility of saving it as a PDF, the whole score sheet, and then you can use it both as a historical record, and you could also use it as a source of posting or sharing with somebody else a cool game that you had, or maybe if you had a question about something, like how would you score this or whatever. It's a neat way to share the information for different reasons. So with that, that will wrap up this video and this series of videos on the Custom League in GreenFox version 3, which was creating a custom league using historical teams, playing a game, and then computing the game stats and saving them as cumulative stats. I hope you found this informative and maybe inspiring, but hopefully you can find a way to use it in your baseball sim project and make it more fun, and so you can spend more time playing games, looking at the stats, as opposed to writing them down or computing them instead. So enjoy. Well, that wraps up this GreenFox video. I hope you found it helpful. But either way, I'd appreciate any feedback, whether it's what you liked about the video or the spreadsheet, or things you didn't like about the video or spreadsheet, or ideas that you have to make either the videos or the spreadsheet to make it work better. I appreciate all the feedback. Thanks again for taking the time.